The ship shudders as it cuts through the atmosphere, its metal frame creaking under the strain. Inside, the astronauts grip their seats, faces set with the quiet calm of those accustomed to space. Even though their minds are racing, the journey home was supposed to be triumphant. A moment to breathe in Earth's air again, to hear the chatter of ground control and welcome a world they've left behind for years. But as they near landing, something feels off. One of them adjusts the controls and speaks into his headset. "Mission Control, this is Apollo 29 on descent. Do you copy?" Silence. He glances at his crewmates. They exchange puzzled looks but stay quiet, expecting a delayed reply. "Mission Control, this is Apollo 29. Do you read us?" Again, nothing. Just static. The mission commander, Calloway, mutters something about a technical glitch, but he doesn't sound convinced. As the ship draws closer to Earth's surface, the silence stretches. No comforting instructions, no chatter from Mission Control. Just an empty frequency. They land smoothly enough. The autopilot guides them down with ease, and for a moment, the familiar pull of gravity fills them with a strange kind of comfort. Earth is right there outside, close enough to touch. Calloway, in a voice low and tinged with apprehension, says, "All right, we go out, get our bearings, and make contact on foot if we have to." The others nod, expressions tense but resolute. With a soft hiss, the hatch door opens and they step out, bracing themselves for a crowd of scientists or at least a small welcoming team. Instead, they're greeted by nothing, just empty tarmac stretching into the distance under a sky that feels too quiet. They move carefully, almost reverently, taking in their surroundings. There are buildings nearby, familiar structures from their training days, offices, research labs, hangars, but they all look deserted. Cars are parked in neat lines, but not a soul is around. One of them finally breaks the silence, his voice barely a whisper. Where is everyone?" They continue forward, their boots echoing on the pavement, the only sound in an otherwise mute landscape. No birds cawing in the distance, no hum from the nearby buildings, no rustle of wind. Just silence, thick and oppressive. Calloway's voice cuts through it, forced and authoritative, trying to stave off the creeping sense of dread. "All right, let's check the comms again. Maybe we can find some signal outside the landing zone." One of the crew members raises the communicator, turning knobs, tapping the screen, waiting for any sign of life. But each frequency is just static, a cold, endless hiss in their ears. After several futile attempts, they look at each other, unease etched in every face. With no other option, they begin to explore the facility, moving toward the main headquarters. They try to reassure themselves. Maybe it's just a strange blackout. Maybe the base was evacuated temporarily. But each empty room, each silent hallway, only deepens their worry. They enter the control center, hoping for any sign of activity. The lights are on. Screens display various metrics and statuses, like someone had just been there. But there's no one, just empty seats, some papers scattered on a desk, and the eerie, humming glow of machinery left running with no operators. One of them examines a cup of coffee sitting on a table nearby. It's cold, but otherwise untouched, as if its owner had simply walked away and never returned. He glances back at the others, and they all know what he's thinking. People don't just disappear mid-task. The group moves deeper into the building, eyes darting toward every darkened corner, every shadow that seems to loom in the silence. An unsettling realization begins to settle over them. This place hasn't been abandoned for a long time. There's no dust, no signs of decay. Everything looks frozen, preserved. They finally step outside again, leaving the silence of the facility behind, but it doesn't get better. Instead, the eerie quietness follows them, a presence that feels almost alive. Outside, it's the same. Cars on the roads, perfectly parked, some with doors left ajar. Buildings standing tall, casting long shadows across the pavement. One of the crew mutters, half to himself. It's like they all just vanished. Calloway looks up, scanning the vast, empty horizon. The city should be bustling. Even on the quietest days, Earth had never felt this still. The silence is so complete that it's unnatural. There isn't even the faintest breeze to disturb the quiet. They move through the empty streets, the stillness pressing down on them, making it hard to breathe. They pass through neighborhoods, find empty homes with lights on, toys left out in yards, newspapers on doorsteps. Every detail feels like a mockery of normal life, perfectly arranged but without anyone left to live it. One of them suddenly stops, gripping Calloway's arm, voice barely a whisper. Listen. They stand perfectly still, straining their ears. But there's nothing. No birds, no wind, no hum of city life. Not even the faintest buzz of an electric current. They're enveloped in a silence so absolute it feels almost hostile, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something. Calloway's face pales, his earlier confidence shattered. He tries to keep his voice steady, for his team's sake. All right, maybe there's an explanation for all this. Maybe everyone was evacuated. There could have been some kind of emergency. His words trail off, as if he realizes he's not even convincing himself. He can see it in their faces. They're all starting to feel it, the gnawing dread at the edge of their minds, the sinking feeling that something is profoundly wrong. One of the younger crew members glances around, his face pale. But why would it be this quiet? His voice cracks, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to emerge from the silence. Even if there was some kind of evacuation, it shouldn't be this silent. No one has an answer. They continue walking, feeling like trespassers in a world that isn't theirs anymore, a world that seems to have turned its back on life itself. They move cautiously, heading beyond the base and into the city. The sight that greets them is unnervingly perfect. Streets lined with parked cars, stores with displays set up, homes with lights on. Every place they pass looks untouched, preserved as if waiting for people to return. But there's not a single soul in sight. One of them pauses by a car parked on the side of the road, the driver's seat empty, the door ajar. A purse sits in the passenger seat, its contents undisturbed, as if its owner had only just stepped away. The strange emptiness gnaws at them, an unsettling mockery of normal life with every detail locked in place, as though frozen in time. They split up, venturing into nearby shops, searching for any sign of what happened. Inside a coffee shop, cups of coffee sit on tables, some half-finished, still in the exact spots where people had left them. Plates with remnants of meals. A notebook open on a counter. A pen left beside it, as though someone had been writing only moments before. There's even a radio playing faintly in the corner, though it's static, endlessly hissing in the otherwise complete silence. One astronaut picks up a newspaper from the table, its date confirming their worst fears. They've been gone for years, decades even. Yet, everything here looks as fresh as if they had left just yesterday. There's no dust, no sign of decay. The plants outside are green and healthy. The air feels strangely still, as if time itself has somehow been interrupted, suspending the world in a strange stasis. The deeper they venture, the more the eerie normalcy of it all seems to wear on them. Walking down the rows of houses, they peer through windows and see ordinary scenes. Meals on tables, coats slung over chairs, a television left on, displaying static. Each detail, rather than comforting them, twists into something profoundly unsettling. It's as though every person had simply vanished, gone without any warning, leaving the world perfectly intact. One of them enters a small house, carefully moving through the rooms. A family photo hangs on the wall, smiling faces looking back at him. In the kitchen, a bowl of fruit sits on the counter untouched, without a speck of rot. He reaches out to touch an apple, finding it firm and fresh, as if it had been placed there just this morning. Every room feels like a silent accusation, a reminder of people who should be there but aren't. Outside, Another astronaut finds a diary lying open on the ground beside a park bench. Flipping through its pages, he sees that the last few entries are hastily scribbled, the handwriting frantic and uneven. One entry reads, "People are going missing. Whole families vanishing overnight." Another entry, in shakier writing, reads, "I can't stay here. The silence is growing." It's like something is watching. Nearby, they find another unsettling clue. A stack of newspaper clippings, some scattered on the ground, as if someone had tried to gather information just before everything stopped. The articles document mysterious disappearances, reports of people waking to find neighbors gone, entire buildings empty, towns thinning out without a trace. Headlines hint at growing fear, communities desperate to find answers. The quiet spreads. One headline reads, "Where are they all going?" The astronauts exchange uneasy glances, piecing together a fragmented, disturbing story. They can only guess at what might have happened. Was it an alien force that came silently, taking people away? Or was it something far beyond their understanding, an event that erased life as they knew it, leaving the planet itself as a hollow shell? A growing dread grips them as the questions pile up, none with answers. The further they go, the more each clue points toward a sudden, inexplicable vanishing. And as they search, that suffocating, unnatural silence follows, as if the world itself is watching them, waiting for them to understand what happened. As they venture further, a faint, rhythmic sound echoes through the stillness. It could almost be footsteps, but the cadence is off. Too irregular, too faint, barely more than a suggestion of movement. They freeze, each one listening, eyes darting toward shadowed alleyways and empty doorways. But when they look, there's nothing, just the same silent, empty streets stretching out in all directions. They press on, wary, each creak of a floorboard or rustle of debris heightening their nerves. One astronaut swears he saw a shape flicker at the edge of his vision, darting out of sight just as he turned to face it. Another catches a glimpse of a shadow, moving too quickly to be anything but a trick of the mind, or so he tells himself. But these glimpses, these echoes, start coming more frequently. None of them can explain it, and every explanation they attempt to offer feels hollow. The tension between them grows. Whispers pass between them, and suspicion flickers in their eyes. They start to feel exposed, like they're being watched, though none of them can agree on by what or from where. Each crew member begins to sense it, this unseen watcher lurking just beyond their line of sight, hiding in the edges of silence. One night, as they huddle in an abandoned house for shelter, exhaustion finally claims them, and they drift into a tense, restless sleep. But in the morning, only 3 of them wake. One of them is missing, their belongings scattered as if they'd been taken mid-sleep. Panic flashes through the group as they call out for him, scouring the empty streets, searching for any sign of where he might have gone. But there's no trace of him, no sign of struggle. Just his last words, scrawled on the wall beside his bed in shaky, uneven letters. It's here in the silence. The remaining 3 stand frozen, reading the words over and over, as if trying to pull some hidden meaning from them. They don't speak it aloud, but a shared thought runs through their minds. If he was taken, it could happen to any of them. In a desperate attempt to regain control, they pull out their radios, recalibrating the settings, frantically searching for any frequency, any line of communication. But every attempt to reach anyone, mission control any survivors, even some distant alien signal, is met with the same suffocating silence. It's as if all frequencies have been swallowed by the emptiness that's engulfed the planet. Not a single crackle of static, just an expanse of dead air, indifferent and impenetrable. The silence feels alive now, pressing in on them, thickening around them. They huddle close together, whispering half-formed theories and anxious reassurances. One suggests it's some kind of alien life form, something that has taken Earth and left them stranded. Another speculates about an environmental disaster, a global phenomenon that they couldn't have anticipated. But none of these ideas bring them any comfort. Each theory seems more outlandish than the last, and yet, terrifyingly, each feels just as plausible. As they move through the house, a glint on the wall catches one astronaut's eye. Scratched faintly into the wallpaper are strange symbols, rough and hurried, as if left in haste. They seem meaningless at first, a swirl here, a jagged line there, but they're repeated in patterns, scattered across walls and doors, carved into tables, even into the floorboards. The markings feel like a message left behind, something meant for anyone who might find them. But whether they're a warning or a call for help, the astronauts can't say. The symbols claw at their minds, an itch they can't scratch, and even when they close their eyes, the strange shapes seem to dance behind their eyelids. Hours later, as they continue their search for answers, one of them begins to hear faint whispers. At first, he assumes it's one of the others talking, but then he realizes the voices are murmuring just out of earshot, low and indistinct, an unsettling hum that doesn't seem to come from anywhere at all. He tries to ignore it, but the sound only grows, words brushing the edges of his mind, elusive, slipping away just as he tries to make sense of them. He tells the others, and to his relief, he isn't alone. They've heard it too. At first, they thought it was only their imagination, an echo in the vast, unnatural silence. But now, the whispers are growing louder, filling the space around them like a fog, swirling just out of reach. Every attempt to follow the sound brings them to empty rooms and barren hallways. They're caught in a nightmare with no one to tell them it's not real. In a final act of desperation, they leave the house and roam the city, shouting, pleading with whatever force might be there, demanding answers from the emptiness. But the silence offers no reply, swallowing their words whole. Only their echoes remain, bouncing back from the empty buildings, mockingly hollow. The day wears on, and as they move through yet another empty street, one of them stumbles across a series of notes, written in red ink on scraps of paper scattered along the ground. The handwriting is barely legible, frenzied and erratic, but they make out a few haunting words. We tried to run. There's no way out. Another reads. It comes in the quiet. The last paper, half crumpled and smeared, simply says, we are the last. The air grows colder, the silence thicker, like a living thing tightening around them. Exhausted and fearful, they huddle together in a small room, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. They barely speak now, too afraid that their voices might summon whatever it is lurking in the silence, too drained to come up with more theories or explanations. In the heavy silence, they sit listening, waiting. Every creak of the floor, every breath feels amplified, magnified against the emptiness around them. And in that silence, each of them begins to realize a terrifying truth. It's not just emptiness they're facing. The silence itself feels alive, like a presence they can't see but can feel watching them, studying them, waiting for them to let their guard down. The whispers return, clearer now, brushing past their ears like a dark, icy wind, speaking words they can't quite understand, yet feel are meant for them alone. They press their hands to their ears, trying to shut it out, but it's inescapable, filling their minds, their very souls, creeping into the places where fear lives, taking root. One by one, they find themselves unable to speak, unable to even think clearly. Every thought they form is soon drowned out by the endless, crushing silence that presses against them, unyielding, filling their hearts with dread as they wait, helpless, for whatever might come next. The astronauts, running on adrenaline and dread, push forward, scouring the abandoned city in a last-ditch effort to understand what happened to humanity. In a darkened room of what used to be a government building, one of them stumbles upon an old computer terminal. The screen is cracked, the technology archaic by their standards, but somehow it still hums to life, flashing messages of errors and corrupted files. Among the debris, they spot something promising, a stack of dusty tapes labeled with ominous dates, stretching back to what appear to be the last days of human life on Earth. After tinkering with the equipment, they manage to play a tape. The grainy footage shows a once bustling news studio. The reporter is visibly shaken, her face lined with fear as she delivers her report. She speaks in fractured sentences about disappearances on a massive scale, of cities going silent overnight. Her voice wavers as she describes strange events. Entire buildings found empty, streets cleared of people as though they'd simply ceased to exist. Behind her, in a glass-walled room, the news staff can be seen in various states of panic, some of them arguing, others slumped in silent horror, clutching one another. The camera jolts, and the image cuts to static before resuming with another clip. This time, a handheld recording of civilians gathering in a town square, panic etched onto every face. A man shouts over the din about the empty, pointing at the sky and insisting that something unseen is coming for them, that the silence is creeping closer. The camera sways as the person recording stumbles back, the scene dissolving into chaos as people begin running in every direction. The footage ends abruptly, plunging the room back into silence. A series of shorter clips reveal more, doctors and scientists discussing theories that sound increasingly desperate. Theories of mass disappearances from a virus or chemical agent are dismissed, as no bodies are left behind. Others claim it's an alien invasion, with an entity consuming human life itself, while others suggest it's something supernatural, a force beyond any earthly understanding. The only common theme in every video is fear. Fear of the silence, of the stillness, of something that came unseen and took everything with it. As the astronauts finish watching, a heavy, unspoken realization settles over them. Whatever had wiped out humanity hadn't left. It's still here, hidden in the quiet, lurking within the stillness they've been surrounded by since their return. The knowledge grips them, cold and suffocating, a weight on their chests as they each struggle to process the gravity of their situation. In the depths of the building, they find another horrifying relic, an emaciated figure, hunched over, muttering softly to himself. His eyes are wide and unfocused, as if he's half lost to another world. When he sees them, he begins to laugh, a high, eerie sound that echoes off the walls, bouncing back at them in the oppressive silence. His clothes are tattered, his hair matted, and he rocks back and forth, chanting words that make no sense to the astronauts but seem vitally important to him. They approach him cautiously, trying to pull him back to some semblance of reality, asking him questions in the hopes he might shed some light on what happened. But his responses are disjointed, incoherent, references to them or it that takes and never returns. He speaks of how he's been hiding for years, somehow spared when everyone else vanished, though he doesn't know why. He mutters about the silence, as if it were a living thing, breathing around them, waiting for the right moment to consume. One astronaut tries to comfort him, asking if there's a way to escape, if there's anywhere safe. But the man only laughs harder, the sound dissolving into a coughing fit. He looks up at them with wild, terrified eyes and whispers, "It doesn't matter where you go. Once you hear the silence, it's already too late." The astronauts exchange grim looks, understanding his meaning all too well. They realize now that they were never alone, not even from the moment they touched down. This force, whatever it is, has been lying in wait, feeding off the empty spaces around them, perhaps even drawing power from their fear. Their arrival on Earth has somehow awakened it, a disturbance that has reignited whatever it was that claimed humanity. With this dreadful knowledge, the remaining crew members pull away from the man, whose eyes are now glazed, muttering to himself in a broken loop. The encounter has shaken them, made them feel more exposed and helpless than ever. They're no longer just lost explorers. They're prey in a world that doesn't want them to leave. In a moment of clarity, they turn back to the recordings, hoping to find a final answer. Digging through the files, they find a message marked "Final Broadcast," sent out as humanity's last words to anyone who might hear them. They play it, watching as a government official, surrounded by armed guards in an underground bunker, stares blankly into the camera, as though he's already lost all hope. With a hollow voice, he speaks of a force that no weapon, no science, no prayer could stop. He explains that humanity tried everything: rallies, containment efforts, pleas for help. But nothing could save them from the silence that crept over the world. His final words are whispered, barely audible. There's no fighting it. It just takes everything. The broadcast ends, leaving the crew in a deep, unsettling quiet. For a moment, they simply sit there, letting the reality sink in. The horrifying truth is now undeniable. They're facing something they can't see, can't understand, and have no hope of escaping. The silence that has surrounded them, clinging to their every step, isn't just the absence of sound. It's something far worse, a predator that feeds on life itself, leaving only emptiness in its wake. As they prepare to leave the building, the man's warning echoes in their minds, chilling them to the core. Once you hear the silence, it's already too late. They're trapped, with no chance of escape, with nowhere left to hide from the force that has claimed all of humanity and waits now, watching, as they stand helpless in the midst of a world stripped of life. And as they step back into the empty street, the silence seems to deepen, pressing in around them, as if drawing closer with every breath. The weight of their situation presses down on the crew as they make their way back toward their ship. The sense of isolation is suffocating, and they can no longer shake the feeling that something is closing in around them, waiting for them to slip up. The whispers from before have become more pronounced, growing louder with each passing minute. Now, they no longer sound like distant murmurs. They feel like voices in their minds, whispering in their ears, urging them to turn back, to abandon their plans, to accept the silence. One by one, the crew begins to crack under the pressure. Hallucinations become more frequent, feeding their paranoia. One astronaut swears they saw their reflection in a window, only for it to turn and look at them with eyes that weren't theirs. Another crew member hears the faint sound of children laughing, and when they investigate, there's nothing but the empty building staring back at them. The hallucinations are relentless, tugging at their minds, eroding their grip on reality. As the last remaining members of the crew huddle together, they come to a grim decision. They must leave Earth. They make their way to the ship, hoping that by taking off into space, they might escape the terrible force that has claimed this planet. With every step they take toward the ship, however, something seems to stand in their way. Shadows that flicker unnaturally, strange winds that push against them, as if the very Earth itself is trying to stop them from leaving. The feeling of being watched intensifies, and each of them becomes more convinced that they are not alone. In a desperate sprint, they finally reach the ship, but as they prepare to board, the crew begins to disappear. One member is pulled into the darkness with no warning, vanishing into the air as if swallowed whole. Another cries out, but no sound comes from their mouth as they fall to the ground, their body disintegrating into mist. Panic sets in as the remaining crew members struggle to stay together, but they are picked off one by one. The last astronaut races up the ramp, fighting to get inside, but the door slams shut before they can reach it. Now alone, the final astronaut stumbles back into the ship, the engine already revving. But as they strap into their seat and prepare to launch, they begin to understand what has truly happened. The force that claimed Earth isn't some physical entity or alien presence. It's not something they can shoot or outrun. The empty, as they've come to call it, is a force that drains consciousness itself. It doesn't just erase bodies or lives. It erases the mind, leaving nothing but the husk of a person, unable to escape the never-ending silence. The astronaut's breath grows shallow. Their vision begins to blur, and a sense of suffocating dread fills them. Their grip on reality starts to slip, their mind fraying as they realize that by returning to Earth, they've already become part of it. They weren't just returning to an empty planet. They were stepping into the silence, a force that has been waiting for them. There is no escape. They, too, have been consumed by the empty, and nothing they do can bring them back. In a final act of desperation, the astronaut records one last log. Their voice is shaky, barely a whisper, as they explain what has happened. They speak to any future explorers who might find this log, warning them of the unimaginable force that claims this planet, of the way it feeds on consciousness, erasing all that was human. They beg anyone who hears this to stay away, to never set foot on Earth. If you find this, don't land, they say, their voice trembling. Earth belongs to the empty now, and once you hear the silence, it's already too late. As the last words leave their lips, the astronaut slumps in their seat, eyes vacant, staring at the empty horizon. The ship's engines roar as it lifts off from Earth, but the astronaut no longer registers the motion. The silence wraps around them, thick and suffocating, until there is nothing left. The final shot of the log is the image of a planet in the distance, an uninhabited orb spinning slowly in the darkness of space. But no one will ever hear the warning. No one will ever know that the empty is still there waiting. The message lies forgotten, just another whisper lost in the void. The story ends with the unsettling realization that no matter who comes next, Earth is lost. The empty is eternal, and there is no escaping it. The astronauts are gone, their consciousness drained, and their warnings are nothing more than a distant echo that will never reach the ears of anyone who might still be out there. And with that, the silence grows deeper, darker, as if the universe itself has swallowed the Earth whole.